So in this video I'm going to show you how to make this little tool in order to properly join broken plastic pieces together. As I said, this is more or less a two-part video. So the first part would obviously be the part where I made the little piece of wire that's going to bind the two plastic pieces together. Now to make this, I basically took a piece of angle iron like this. I drilled 4 holes in it and I put 4 M6 bolts in it. I welded the bottom sides just so that they stay in place, and for the gaps to make them just about even, I only took a grinder and I just grinded them all slightly even just so that they sit nice and evenly. That's how I built this. We'll get to how I use it in a moment. For the part in the soldering iron, I obviously only took my normal soldering iron like this, and in order to make this piece of wire fit into the point of it, I then took a basic piece of steel plate, whatever you have laying around. I just cut out a rectangular piece like this. I drilled in 3 holes into it, like that. And I then used only basically 3 bolts. This is M6 bolts and a couple of M6 nuts. And in 2 of them, in the point right over there, I just drilled 2 holes, as you can see in these 2 over here. Now the reason for that is almost self-explanatory, but I'll show you in a moment. And I then just bolted them to this little plate with the middle one pointing the other direction. And the reason for the middle one pointing the other direction would be so that it can fit inside the soldering iron like this, and then only be screwed in place, to be held in place. And then obviously when this is screwed in place in the soldering iron, this little wire piece that I've made will then stick into the 2 holes like that, which would be held in place by the spring action of the wire itself, and it won't fall out while it's heating up. So that's a basic, very basic design, very simple, but actually very smart. It's a very useful method. So let me put this together. We'll put it into the soldering iron, heat it up, and then we'll join 2 plastic pieces together. Now, if you put this in the soldering iron, this obviously will take a bit longer to heat up than your normal soldering tip. This is a lot more metal that needs to heat up, and it needs to heat up the wire as well. So it does take a couple of minutes to heat up properly to the appropriate temperature to be hot enough to penetrate the plastic that you're going to put this into. Right, so the first part of this whole exercise would be to make these little wires, the piece that's going to join the plastic together. Now in order for this, I'm basically taking a normal roll of wire, binding wire. I cut off the appropriate piece, a length like this, and I then take this little thing that I made, the jig, and I start by putting the wire through one of the holes like this. I then bend it forward, twist it around and through the bolt like this, all the way, both sides like that. And then for the last one, before I put it through the hole, I merely just lift this out a bit, bend this forward. If the wire is a bit too thick to handle by hand, you can use a pair of pliers as well for the smaller ends, or you can just make it a bit longer. I'm going to put this back, and then for the part that you can't push it down, or if the wire is too thick or too hard, you can just press this down with a screwdriver between the bolts like that, all the way, all the edges. Press it down like that so that it goes zigzag between the bolts coming out the bottom, the 2 ends. You then just, when you're done, press it up from the bottom like that, removing it from the bolts and the jig, and you end up with something looking like this. What you're going to do next is basically on the bottom side, where you see the flat surface like this, on both ends, you're going to lightly, with a side cutter, make an indentation into the wire like that, only slightly. If you zoom, let's just try to get that in focus. You'll see there's a little indentation in the steel wire. You'll do this on both sides. Now the reason for this, slightly roll it there, it might be a bit easier. There you go. Not cut it all the way through, only weaken it so that if you twist it like I did there, the end would break off. So this side, once again, if you twist it, the end would break off, just like this top part would. Now the idea is so that when this is inserted into the plastic and that part is below the surface, you can merely twist off these two ends and it won't have any sharp edges sticking out. So let's make another one and then go and try it out. Okay, so for this part of this smelter, or whatever you want to call it, how I made this was basically taking a piece of scrap metal like this, a piece of offcut metal. I then basically cut it into a rectangle shape like that, and I drilled 3 holes into it to accommodate 3 bolts. In this case, it's M6 bolts. Now, in 2 of these M6 bolts, right in the edge like there, over there, focus a bit, I basically drilled 2 holes like this one, and that's for the ones on the side, and that's where the wire will obviously fit in. The middle one is then only put in from the other side in order to fit into the soldering iron like this, and then it's just going to be tightened into place. Very, very simple, very easy. Now, once you've inserted the bolts and the nuts into your steel plate like this, and this is inserted into the soldering iron, you basically then take one of these wires that we've made previously and just insert it into the 2 holes like that, and that's being held into place by the spring action of the wire itself. And this is then what's going to be mounted into the plastic to keep it together. Once again, those 2 incisions, let's see if we can get this in focus properly. Those 2 incisions in the wire, one on each side, that's for the be able to twist these legs off like I demonstrated previously as well, once this is inserted or melted into the plastic. So I'm now going to insert it, heat up the soldering iron. Once again, this does take a couple of minutes to heat up. It takes longer than a normal soldering iron because it's a lot more metal that needs to be heated up, unlike a normal soldering tip, which is just one piece of copper, which would be something like this. Okay, so I've got 2 pieces of scrap plastic like this. I'm going to put it together with the soldering iron that's been heating up for a while now. I'm then going to bring it over the top, press it down like that. And you can see the wire melting into the plastic. So we're going to do it about that far. Like you can see, it is quite settled now. This is still a bit hot, so let me just get a piece of cloth to hold this down, and then with a piece of plier, or with a pair of pliers, I'm only going to twist off the 2 legs like we've demonstrated beforehand with those 2 incisions that we made into it, and then you'll see that it's nicely fused, welded together below the surface of the plastic because there's no sharp edges sticking out. It's still a bit warm, but that's fine. And then the plastic on top that still sticks out a bit, the groove that has been melted now basically, you can flatten that out with your soldering iron as well, and you can put a couple of these pieces of wire in your joint if you wanted to join something. And this is quite steady. It's one piece of wire, nowhere else connected in any way, and very steady indeed. So I'm very happy the way this is working. And obviously I've switched off the soldering iron now, but a simple device like this, bit of modification and a piece of wire with the ends that's now broken off. We can see where those incisions were made. They were a bit weaker, so they easily twist off. And then this can be neatly sanded or body primered or filleted or whatever needs to be done in order to smooth this out. You can also then join the gap with some pieces of plastic and melt it together. But the main idea was to have it joined together to get something steady in between the 2 pieces of plastic, so that if you've got 2 pieces that's broken off, you need to join it. This is a very effective method. So if you like this video, you like this method, be sure to like this clip. And also, if you wish to support the channel, you can check out the super thanks button below this video. Until next time, thank you very much, guys.